Sand dunes are one of nature's remarkable formations, created by the interaction of wind, sand, and time. At first glance, they might seem simple, just piles of sand that the wind has sculpted over the years. But when we dig deeper into how sand dunes form, we find a complex process shaped by various natural forces, which transform barren landscapes into undulating waves of sand, creating habitats for unique ecosystems along the way. The story of sand dunes begins with individual grains of sand. These grains can originate from many sources: eroded rock from mountains, shells broken down by the waves, or even volcanic ash. Over time, these particles are worn down by the elements and carried by rivers, seas, and winds to areas where dunes can eventually form. Wind plays a vital role in transporting sand particles over long distances, carrying them away from the original source of the sand and depositing them in areas where the wind loses energy. The conditions in these areas, usually deserts, beaches, or places with minimal vegetation, allow for the free movement of sand particles across open landscapes, where they begin to collect and accumulate. For a sand dune to form, the environment must have a steady supply of sand, and the wind must blow consistently from one direction. As wind moves across a sandy surface, it picks up loose particles, lifting them into the air and carrying them along in a process known as saltation. In this process, grains of sand hop and bounce across the ground, propelled by gusts of wind. Each time a grain lands, it can dislodge other grains, setting off a chain reaction of movement across the sand's surface. When the wind loses some of its energy, usually because of an obstacle or a decrease in speed, it can no longer carry the sand particles and they are dropped to the ground. This process of deposition is where the magic of sand dune formation truly begins. Over time, as more sand is deposited in a specific area, small mounds start to build up, growing taller and wider with each passing gust of wind. These mounds become the starting points of what will eventually grow into a sand dune. The shape and size of sand dunes are influenced by many factors, including wind speed, the consistency of wind direction, and the characteristics of the sand itself. For instance, if the wind direction remains stable, dunes will form in a more organized manner, often creating long ridges or crescent-shaped dunes called barchans. Barchan dunes are shaped like crescents, with their tips pointing downwind. These dunes are common in areas with limited sand supply and strong, unidirectional winds. In other regions where the wind changes direction frequently, sand dunes can take on more complex shapes. Star dunes, for example, are formed in places where wind blows from multiple directions, creating a star-like structure with several arms extending outward. These dunes are often the tallest because sand accumulates from different directions, allowing them to grow upward. Linear dunes, or longitudinal dunes, are formed by winds that come from two main directions, causing the sand to align in long, parallel ridges. These dunes can stretch for miles and are often seen in some of the world's largest deserts. One of the fascinating aspects of sand dunes is that they are not static. They are constantly shifting and changing with the wind. Dunes migrate across the landscape, sometimes at surprising speeds, as the wind carries sand from one side to the other. This movement can be observed in time-lapse photography, where entire dunes appear to flow across the desert like waves on the ocean. The rate at which a dune moves depends on the wind speed and the availability of loose sand. In some cases, dunes can move several meters in a year, gradually encroaching on new areas and transforming the landscape in their path. Sand dunes also play an important ecological role, providing habitat for a variety of plants and animals that have adapted to survive in these harsh, shifting environments. Certain types of grasses, for example, are capable of rooting themselves deeply into the sand, stabilizing it and preventing it from moving as easily. These plants help anchor the dunes in place, allowing for the formation of more permanent dune structures. Over time, this stabilization can lead to the development of a dune ecosystem where plants and animals coexist in a delicate balance. Small mammals, reptiles, and insects make their homes in the dunes, relying on the shelter and food sources that the dune ecosystem provides. In coastal areas, sand dunes play an even more vital role, acting as natural barriers that protect the land from the sea. During storms, these dunes absorb the impact of powerful waves, preventing flooding and erosion of inland areas. Coastal dunes are particularly vulnerable to human activity, as construction, foot traffic, and recreational use can easily disrupt the fragile sand dune ecosystems. When these protective dunes are damaged or destroyed, the coastline becomes more susceptible to storm damage, leading to increased erosion and the loss of natural habitats. Human impact on sand dunes, both in coastal and desert environments, is significant. In many areas, dunes are threatened by development, agriculture, and tourism, which can destabilize them and lead to erosion. However, efforts to preserve and restore sand dunes have been implemented in some regions. Techniques such as planting native vegetation, creating barriers to prevent sand movement, and restricting access to sensitive areas help protect and preserve these natural formations. The beauty of sand dunes lies not only in their aesthetic appeal but also in the story they tell about the power of natural forces. Dunes remind us of the ceaseless movement of the earth, shaped by the wind and time into landscapes that seem otherworldly yet are grounded in simple processes. Each dune is a testament to patience and transformation, a work of art created by the environment's forces working together over millennia. In the grander scheme, sand dunes are part of Earth's dynamic systems, interacting with water cycles, climate patterns, and geological processes. They reveal how the natural world operates, each grain of sand adding to the history of our planet. Whether in the deserts or along coastlines, dunes serve as symbols of resilience and adaptability, representing the ongoing dance between the forces of nature and the elements that make up our world. Through studying them, we gain insight into Earth's history, its processes, and the delicate balance that sustains life in even the most arid and challenging environments.